Then we need a discovery agent. Once the system knows that I've decided I want to become a psychologist, and it knows I need 38% more knowledge to become a psychologist, this discovery agent should go out and start finding me those sources of information, those open online resources, and it should present it to me when I wake up in the morning and say, George, you're now down to 36%. Do these, 2 things today and you'll be down to 32%, knowledge deficiency still. Which again comes into a matching agent, a monitoring agent, because if you were to think of it this way, if my full life was recorded, the words I speak, the discussions I have on a daily basis, my email, digital online activity, if those were all integrated, learning wouldn't be an explicit task I do necessarily. The evaluation of my learning would be an underpinning to all the activities I do on a daily basis. The intent being that the teacher and the educator still plays that social guide and that role guide, because as I stated, we need technology to do what it does well, and we need people to do what they do well. But it is this notion that we come to, when we start a degree in psychology, or when we start a master's in educational technology, the program assumes we have 0% knowledge when we get there. And that's absolute nonsense. Everyone's got some knowledge, it's just the knowledge is all in different stages. Right? So not everyone has the same knowledge deficiency, which is, I think, a significant opportunity for the education process to start to say, well, let's devise a system that personalizes and adapts the learning process in such a way that learners don't need to duplicate what they already know, and every learner is obviously at a different stage. So it's just a simple model I suggested. It's a technologically externalized knowledge and learning was the model. I tried calling it Learnometer, but people told me that was a cheesy idea, so I still haven't had a good name for it. But anyway, it's just where we begin to use agents that, while we sleep, it analyzes the discussions and activities we had during the day, the knowledge that we gained, the conceptual development that we had, and it presents that to us the next morning with customized learning plan for that day, which will bring us this much closer to being a psychologist. Another way to look at it, if you look at the top of the screen, where it says learners output data, your top left. We're always throwing off data. Personal learning environments, learning management systems, mobile devices, GPS locations on it, social media. So this is data that we're always throwing off. And this begins to then form a profile. Either profile information that we've identified, we've said, I'm interested in this, or profile information that's inferred from existing data, such as I mentioned, our social connections. Then, moving over to your right, you see this notion of intelligent data, which is basically the semantic web or data that's not ambiguous. This is curriculum. I mean, we would know roughly, you could map out the knowledge structure to be a nurse. You wouldn't be able to map out the soft elements, right? Because we don't just know how to be a nurse or know how to be a doctor. You become one. Right? There is a stage of becoming which is acquiring sort of the tacit, the social, the soft elements of it. That's something that you can't gain just by having a personalized knowledge agent. You need to be in a particular situation in order to experience that. That's where the educator comes in, as I mentioned on this, this previous slide, where the mentor and guide helps you become a psychologist rather than just acquiring the knowledge that consists of being a psychologist. Now, at this point, then, we have our intelligent data, and then we have our point of analysis where it looks at our conceptual understanding based on interactions, papers we've written, discussions we've had, face-to-face or on blogs or whatever else. And it uses these data trails then to compare and say, like I said, you're 62% to being a psychologist. It then also serves an additional role of prediction, which I'll get into in a separate screen. It then allows us to, or the system to know, what do I need to give George that's personalized? What do I need to provide him or provide you or whoever so that everyone basically has their own particular course? They're not all taking one standard course created by an instructor. Everyone's taking a personal course created by the system, the personalization and the adaptation end of it. So essentially what it looks like, because this is a key problem with a lot of university systems, right? There's a high level of failure or dropout that is signaled before it happens. There's Sandy Pentland has done a text looking at signals. Honest Signals is the name of the text. And what he looks at is, individuals when they're dating, for example, speed dating sessions, they throw off signals that indicate whether or not they're going to want to meet up with this person or actually date this person. He was also, with his research group, able to look at people who are in a raise negotiation session at work. And regardless of language, just by signals, the cues that we throw off unintentionally, right? Like if I say something and you roll your eyes, those are the kinds of things that he'd be able to analyze, and he could tell without listening to the language transcript of a performance review, he'd be able to tell with a fairly high degree of accuracy whether or not a person received a raise. So what I'm trying to say is we signal what we're going to do well before we do it. We don't just wake up one day and say, I hate university, I'm dropping out. We signal early warning signs that say we're going to drop out. And this is one area I think where universities in particular, admissions departments or the institutional data group in particular, should be very interested in making sure that we capture or we're able to pick up the signals on early leavers before they actually leave the program. And it's not a very complex process. There's simple patterns of success and patterns of failure that you can observe. You know, frequency of class, time logging in, utilization of other services within the university, going to the library, language of frustration that's expressed, blogs, you know, wherever else. I just read today in Calgary we had, there's a lawsuit that a university brought against a student who said, I no longer fear hell. I just took a course with Prof. X. And the professor was offended, not surprisingly, but instead of just saying, well, okay, you know, everybody's got their own opinions, the university decided this was defamation. They sued the student who posted this. Now, these things never go well, right? I mean, the university, so just today I read the university lost that particular lawsuit because students have a right to say that they're going through hell. Now, my eyes is that's a wonderful example of data that the university should use to inform its practice, not data that the university should attempt to suppress. Because I would look at that as signaling data, right? There's something being communicated that the university needs to decide what does that signal mean. And so in this case, you have the analytics that we capture from student activity, student interactions in Moodle, in Blackboard or other tools, and we use that to determine or to predict whether we need to adapt the learning content, personalize it, or whether we need to intervene. You know, there are points, let's say, where a student's beginning to lose interest in a program. And it's not that we're going to capture everyone that loses interest. In some cases, they're just not matched to the program. It's not their area of interest. But in other cases, it may be that they just need a bit of encouragement. They need a bit of support. They maybe have a question they're not wrapping their head around, or there's a circumstance they need help for. Most universities have developed very well structured help resources, from counseling to academic support and help with, you know, math or English or whatever topics that the student's grappling with. So it's not a very complex task to roll out. And final point here is the returning to this concept, we use analytics in this process to help make sense of it. But the final one is just revisiting this sense that instead of analyzing what a student knows, we compare what they know with what is viewed to be knowledgeable within a subject, the knowledge structure of a field. So it's learner knowledge. We don't care whether they developed informally or formally. It really doesn't matter. If they know it, they know it. That's sufficient. Then we have a body of knowledge, or a term I've used, intelligent data, which is this is how we have understood what it means to be a physicist, or this is what it means to be a mathematician. And degrees and qualifications aren't based on necessarily exclusive evaluation, the way we're grading, the way we're doing it now. It's instead based on matching the knowledge state of a learner with the knowledge state of a particular field, or someone who's progressed and well developed in a field. And that ultimately gives us a determination of degree or non-degree. Now, we had a long conversation on this yesterday related to grades and the value of grading, so I'm going to skip that one entirely today. So the seventh and really the final concept I'm trying to communicate before we spend time in Q&A is that learning analytics, I mean, we need openness as a base, because what openness does is it makes the content itself available to us for subsequent analysis and for understanding, you know, what's available to us to consider. We need openness so that students can access learning resources on their own and fill in gaps that they identify themselves that they need. Like, we don't need analytics just for the education system. The students need it themselves. There's a neat tool I run periodically when I feel like being depressed called Time Rescue. Rescue Time, sorry. And what it does is it tracks my activities as I'm typing away on my desktop. And I'll get a weekly email that says, this week you spent, you know, 4.2 hours on social media. You spent, you know, 3.5 hours writing papers. You spent X number of time doing this. So basically those analytics are helpful for me. But again, when you try to reach out beyond yourself, when you want to connect with others, much like the SARS example at the start, you need a system that allows for the open exchange of information. The open exchange of information between learners. And once you have that, you can then begin to analyze and understand what exactly it is that's going on, what it is that learners are doing. And this process then, again, changes the relationship that the individual learner has with the education system itself. Now, the question, I guess, that becomes somewhat critical, and I'll leave this up as a final slide here, the question that becomes somewhat critical in this regard is, what about the timeline? You know, are we talking something that's, 5 years or 20 years or 30 years? Max Planck has a wonderful statement that says, or he said, because he's somewhat on the dead side, but science advances one funeral at a time. And I think in education, that sometimes is a similar feeling, right? That the rate of change really happens as the faculty die off. And I'm not advocating for increased faculty deaths, but I'm trying to emphasize that if you're in seeking to improve the education process, the challenge that we have isn't an inability to do it technologically. The problem that we have is an inability to conceive or to create a vision that could make a model of education happen. That's along these lines. I've seen universities or college systems have done an exceptional job integrating technology, and they have the benefits of systemic change. As I stated earlier, there's a relationship between structure and innovation. It's a tension relationship, but they do need each other in order to function effectively. So I've seen systems where universities have taken an approach that says, well, we're going to administratively support, we're going to think through what does innovation look like in education, and we're going to do some of the things that we need to do administratively to make that happen. Mainly, whether it's something as simple as release time, or whether it's as much as you can mandate in a university, but whether it's mandating, this is our syllabus structure, without overly mandating it. This is the type of minimal technology inclusions in a course. All lectures have to be included, recorded and made available. All interactions with student has to be, captured, and analyzed within a Moodle system, or whatever it is that you're using. So the point of emphasis with this is that it's not the technology that's holding back change in education. It's definitely not students that are holding back change in education. What it really is, and a statement I've made over the last several years, is there's a lack of compelling vision on the part of leadership, on the part of faculty, that's holding back education. And as I stated right at the beginning, what would education look like if you were to craft it today? What would a university system look like if you didn't have to deal with these legacy ideas that are currently inhibitors of change? If you could start from scratch and create something that reflects the value and the attributes of technology, the opportunities, the adjacent possible of technologies, what would that kind of system look like? And the short answer is we don't know, and no one knows. But you only begin to learn what the shape of it will be by beginning to take one step, changing the context around you, taking another step, changing the context around you.